Delegates, I'd like to now welcome to the stage, on behalf of the New South Wales Premier, the Honourable John Barilaro MP, Minister for Regional New South Wales and Minister for Industry and Trade. The Premier, Acting Premier, sorry John, you're Acting Premier. That's very good. Leader of the New South Wales Nationals. He's a proud member of for Monero and in 2016 was elected leader of the New South Wales Nationals and Deputy Premier of New South Wales. John brings a hands-on understanding and a passion to all his portfolios. The Deputy Premier is committed to delivering the $1.6 billion Regional Growth Fund and the $4.2 billion Snowy Hydro Legacy Fund to turbocharge and transform regional economies across the state, giving communities choice in selecting the local infrastructure projects that they need. This is one of the largest investments in regional New South Wales in the state's history. Additionally, John is passionate about youth in our region and works tirelessly to ensure they have opportunities to live, work and raise a family close to home. Thank you, John.
Very well, thank you. Thank you. I think we'll have to update that spiel on me and what my vision is for the regions. That 1.6 billion, we've chewed through about 1.2 of it already. Treasury said we couldn't do it, we did it, so we'll keep going back for more. But firstly, to James, could I, of course, acknowledge you and Peter Arkle, all of you members of New South Wales, farmers, the people that really keep our regional communities alive and well, the people behind local economy. Making sure we create jobs, more importantly, make sure we have a future and we build that on the back of prosperity for our children in the regions. And I make no apologies when championing for regional New South Wales. And I know during the recent state election, I was dubbed Pork Barilaro in relation to my pork barrelling of the regions, and I thought it was quite funny. But for me, I wear that as a badge of honour because what they call pork barrelling, and that's the opposition, I call getting our fair share. That investment that we deserve, that investment that is right to make sure that we build a regional New South Wales, not just for today, but for the future. Can I acknowledge, of course, the new Minister for Agriculture, Adam Marshall. I know he's already addressed this forum today. And I know he has spoken about some of the support package that we've put in place in relation to supporting farmers. I do stand here today as Acting Premier while the Premier is away. She's overseas on her first trip. Gladys and I have been in the leadership team for just over 3 years, and almost 3 years, sorry. And it's the first trip that I can recall in that period where she's actually taken time out and left the country. And I hope that she comes back rested. And I, of course, worry her whenever I'm in charge because I'm renowned for saying a few things controversial. But today I want to talk about what is important to regional New South Wales, and that is, of course, off the back of what is a tough drought. It is a tough time in the regions, and you know it better than I, and you don't want to just hear from a politician standing here in front of you saying, I understand. Hopefully, because the National Party and, of course, members of this government, a lot of us live in regional New South Wales. We live in the same communities. Our kids go to the same schools. We work and play and raise families in the same communities. And we believe, and I believe, we have an understanding of the impact of the drought. The impact of the drought, of course, behind the farm gate is devastating, one of the toughest droughts on record. And I know across the state there are different pockets that are getting through and other pockets that are doing it really, really tough. But we also acknowledge that the drought and the impact of the drought has gone beyond the farm gate, impacting on local economies and local communities, especially around small businesses in the regions that are so important to the vibrancy and, of course, the prosperity of our regions. And that is why this year in the budget, we did allocate $170 million to bring forward local infrastructure projects so that we could stimulate the local economy, support local businesses, tradies, subcontractors, suppliers, and make sure that we were supporting jobs and our local economy. And I've been on a road tour over the last 7 days right across the state. I started down at Scone and ended up in Muswellbrook and Singleton, up to Dubbo, of course, Gilgandra, Coonamble, Nyngan, out to Cobar, Broken Hill, and then back through Orange and Bathurst, and yesterday out to Albury. And I spent 4 hours at home, which the family were happy to see me for a little while. But it's clear that as I've travelled and making significant infrastructure announcements, and out of the $170 million, we're announcing about 22 projects initially to the value of about $90 million. These are projects that are shovel-ready, ready to go, that we've been working with councils, and they stem from community infrastructure, road upgrades, whatever community projects that unlocks immediate jobs. But some of these projects, of course, have long-term job prosperity attached to it, like the announcement in Bathurst, for instance. We announced $4.9 million for an extension of the Kelso Industrial Precinct. So in the short term, that investment of $4.9 million does support jobs, businesses and suppliers in the short term, but long term, what we end up is an industrial precinct that hopefully will attract more industries and businesses. And one of the focuses of the government is also to build diversity in regional New South Wales, in regional economies, that at times of drought or when the mining sector is down or if tourism isn't functioning, that we build some sort of level of resilience by diversifying our local economy. And that is important, that we build the infrastructure on the ground to do so. And that is why in the 20-year vision that we announced last year for regional New South Wales, the blueprint, the roadmap, that I believe will map out a future for the regions, and underpinned by the $4.2 billion from the sale of the Snowy Hydro, that we then went on to legislate in Parliament last year to make sure we protected that $4.2 billion in what is known as the Snowy Hydro Legacy Fund, a future fund of some sort that we can draw on to make sure that we build the infrastructure and unlock the opportunities in regional New South Wales, not just for today but for the future. You know, we've identified, and I'm sure in this room there is no question, we've identified the number one priority being water infrastructure and water security. Number two, of course, which was a significant announcement in the election, it was around mobile phone black spot program, where the New South Wales government, rather than just waiting for the federal government, and I could stand here today and say telecommunications is the responsibility of the federal government, we as a state have identified that as an urgent and a priority policy, and that is why we've set aside $400 million immediately to unlock mobile phone black spot towers right across the regions and invest $100 million in data centres to make sure we improve that connectivity piece. Connectivity is the key. We're talking about really underpinning the infrastructure for regional New South Wales. In the old language, it was road and rail. Yes, significant investment in road and rail continues, but we've got to look at digital connectivity, and that is making sure, one, we get rid of mobile black spots, two, we tap into, of course, data centres which unlock the ability through the internet, and making sure that businesses stay connected. The third piece in that Snowy Hydro Legacy Fund, or the 20-year vision, was of course around connectivity again, and that's the theme through our blueprint. It was around identifying 2, maybe 3 international freight airports directly out of the regions, to connecting producers to markets abroad, and that is something that we now hopefully should have a draft report back in the next couple of weeks, one that we can work to and work with communities and unlock that potential. Another area, of course, is road and rail. Significant investment in road and rail right across the state. One of the things that we announced in the budget, an ambitious program of reclassifying up to 15,000 kilometres of regional roads and take ownership from a state government. All of you in the communities you live would always be able to point to a road that the local council is struggling to keep to update or keep the maintenance on, and we accept that as being cost shifting over all colours of politics over many decades. So we announced what I said is a very significant program, and under Minister Paul Toole, the Minister for Regional Roads and Transport, transferring back something like 15,000 kilometres of regional roads back to the state. I think we'll see long-term investment in road maintenance, making sure, again, on a connectivity piece, making sure our roads are up to date, maintained to a level that allows us to move freight. The second part of that announcement was $500 million, identifying 400 plus timber bridges in the regions that we will now unlock again and invest in those bridges to get, and they're the 400 plus bridges identified by a recent NRMA report, and we will look at a model where not only will we replace those bridges, but also a maintenance program around it that makes sure that those bridges, when they're replaced, are long-term. Again, connectivity is the key. And the final piece in the blueprint from Snowy Hydro was special activation precincts, those that live in the parks area. Parks, of course, because of inland rail. There was an opportunity brought to the state government 2 years ago because of inland rail, and the council there saw an opportunity to make parks an inland port logistic precinct or hub. And the New South Wales government thought it was a fantastic concept, one that we've of course embraced and have been working with the council there now. We're seeing what I believe a very different approach to seeing investment and attracting infrastructure investment plus business and industries to regional centres like parks. And parks, what we did there was activate what is now called a special activation precinct, because of Inland Rail being the catalyst, such a significant investment by the federal government that allows us to do something very, very different. And by doing that, we were able to put on the table first mover incentives to industries to move to parks. There are incentives for skilled workers, a planning process that is truncated and gives confidence to businesses to go through the planning process with guaranteed timelines. And what we're seeing quickly, the interest that is coming from all over Australia and including internationally to set up in that area, not only from a logistics perspective and those companies are associated with transport, but other companies that want to be part of a logistics precinct. Industries around recycling are now options for parks. And that model of special activation precincts has become so popular. We've done the same down at Wagga. We'll possibly look at 3 other sites here in New South Wales that will allow us to focus on diversification, investing in infrastructure, unlocking opportunities for the regions so that we can grow jobs for our kids and our grandkids. And we don't just want any bloody job, we want great jobs for the bush. We want great jobs for the regions for the future, and we need to make sure we continue to see that investment. We accept that there's a lot to do in regional New South Wales. I'm one of the greatest critics of my own government at times, in relation to the investment that's happened in the bush, but I also am one that will always promote what we've already achieved. If you look at the investment in regional New South Wales, since, of course, the Liberals and Nationals returning to government in 2011, we've almost doubled the infrastructure spend in regional New South Wales. And I have all plans to continue that investment to make sure that we don't lose sight on the catch-up that we've seen over 8 years isn't lost over the next 4 years, because there is significant opportunities for further investment across the regions, and that is something I'm very, very excited about. And what we need to make sure is, of course, that we don't sell ourselves out of market because of the drought. We've got to make sure we don't sell ourselves out of the market when it comes to mining and resources in our state. We've got to make sure we don't sell ourselves out of market and attracting tourists to the regions because we're talking down regional New South Wales. Because at a time of drought, I've often said in the House, even though we're doing it tough, we're still open for businesses. We've got food and fibre still being produced. We've got resource sector that is strong. We've got a tourism sector that is strong. Our cafes, our pubs, our hotels are open for business. And we've got to make sure we don't talk down the regions to a point that we talk ourselves out of market. And the final piece is that we don't talk ourselves, or more importantly, our children, that regional and rural New South Wales hasn't got a future, that it is a great place to live, work and play, raise a family. And we've got to make sure that we talk up this sort of investments that are important to a strong and prosperous regional New South Wales. Investments like we're seeing right across the board, over $10.2 billion going into health infrastructure, with regional New South Wales grabbing a big chunk of that. A significant investment in new schools, nearly $8 billion. Again, regional New South Wales getting a big chunk of that. The investment through the connected learning centres, through TAFE, delivering TAFE in communities that we've never had before, or where there has been a TAFE presence, changing the way we deliver a range of options. And I do congratulate Minister Marshall, when he was the Minister for TAFE in the last term of government, in unlocking 12 of those CLCs and more to come. But for the final bit to that is, of course, country university centres. A model that started in my election of the Monero in Cooma with the Cooma University Centre, where the council, along with community leaders, great local champions like Duncan Taylor, who recently in the press has been copping a gobful from The Guardian and some of the lefties out here in Sydney because they can't understand the $16 million investment in relation to country university centres in the regions. If you want kids to stay in regional New South Wales, we've got to give them their opportunity in education and in jobs. And that education journey must include primary, secondary, tertiary. And that is what the country university centres is doing. It's unlocking an opportunity for young people to stay in our regions, in our communities, so that they can study and get a university degree. And when you look across the success of the country university centres in such a short period of time, that success can be measured by outcomes. When I go to Broken Hill and I hear about the 90+ students that have gone through the country university centre in Broken Hill, and when I hear that 70% of them are first of family to have a tertiary education, and we're changing not just a life, but we're going to be changing generations. And that is the sort of investment that we have to be focused on. Because if we want a strong and vibrant future for regional New South Wales, well, guess what? We're going to have to keep our kids. We've got to keep our kids in the regions. They are our future community leaders, business leaders, political leaders. And we need to make sure they are part of the communities that we all are part of the future for the region. So I make no apologies when we cop a bit of grief from the other side about the investment in Country University Centre, because Bronnie Taylor, who's the Minister for Women and Mental Health, is the wife of Duncan Taylor. And can I just say Duncan Taylor's role as CEO of the Country University Centre is voluntary, like when he was also in a voluntary way, making sure when he was with the Isolated Parents Association, for advocating for educational outcomes for the regions. So these are the investments that we've got to put into regional New South Wales. And the final piece there is regional youth. We announced in the election that we wanted to have a standalone minister for regional youth. Why? As I said earlier, we need to make sure we keep our future leaders local. But in parts of our state, in certain communities, the ice epidemic, drugs, mental health, suicides, is a real issue and something that we have to tackle, and that is why we announced a standalone Minister for Regional Youth in Bronnie Taylor to deal with the issues, map the journey forward and find the investment to make sure we keep our kids home and keep them healthy, because they are part of our future. But we've all got a challenge ahead of us. Of course, the drought keeps biting into what's happening in the regions, and we've got to take those challenges as they arise. Water is the big white elephant in the room. There is no question water continues to be the issue. We have towns that are 40 days away from running out of water, 200 days, 12 months, 18 months. It doesn't matter where in this state I go, I know water is an issue. In places like Bourke, luckily we were able to fund some bores to be punched in, and of course we've seen some water security out at, again, the Minister of Agriculture's own backyard, a pipeline to Guyra. I think it's a $13 million investment that will be hopefully online in time in 40 odd days to make sure we don't run out of water in Guyra. But that adds extra pressure on Malpas Dam, because that'll put pressure, if we don't see rain in the next 12, 18 months, on that water reserve. And again, we are starting to talk about that investment in raising the dam wall. No different to the announcement we have already made, $650 million to raise the dam wall at Wyangla. But it's not just dam walls, we've got to build new dams. We've got to put ideology aside. We've got to start burying these environmental impact studies and getting on with building dams. In this term of government, I want to see bulldozers on the ground. I just don't want to see another report, another promise. It's great that I can announce there's $1.4 billion for water security, but unless we've got bulldozers on the ground building dams, we're never going to get there. And I believe, personally, the debate around dams, building new dams and water infrastructure, pipelines, upgrading weirs, is now. While Sydney-siders are now going to stage 1 water restrictions, knowing Warragamba Dam is down to 51%, that desal has kicked off and possibly desal 2 needs to be built, now's the time to make sure that the regions aren't shortchanged when we talk about water security, building pipelines, dams, weirs, etc. The infrastructure that matters, both in a short term, medium and long term, and that must be our focus. I believe we're at a point now that all water infrastructure is of a critical nature, and it should be treated as state significance, which does unlock a different pathway in making decisions and building infrastructure, something that I'm going to take to the party room, one that I hope to take through the Parliament, to make sure that we unlock the infrastructure today for the long term, but also deal with what is the short-term issues that we are facing across the state. And that will be our mantra. The $4.2 billion we've set aside under Snowy Hydro, if all of it has to go to water infrastructure, so be it. So be it. If a few frogs have got to die, so be it. We've just got to get on and build some dams and pipelines and make sure we do not run out of water in the regions. And it's great because I've spoken to Michael McCormack. It was great to hear Michael McCormack in the federal parliament yesterday talking around the same vein. I've sat down with Michael. They've got $1.3 billion plus a $2 billion loan facility where I believe New South Wales is ready to take its fair share and making sure we build that infrastructure, and that will be our focus. And all of this, you're the ones that are important. It's the New South Wales Farmers Association, it's the New South Wales farmers that have to partner, and we have to partner with. You know, when a politician gets up and talks about a whole heap of issues and policies, it's easy for media and those third-party stakeholders to attack us because it's easy, especially when you're going against their policy, their ideology. But we need you to stand with us. We need the voice of New South Wales farmers to be heard, and we'd be happy to, and we continue to be proud to work with you. So when it comes to trespass, it was because of the noise around trespass, and it was our farmers that were being under attack and our farming families. That is why the Minister, through the Biosecurity Act, was able to respond. We'll continue to look at that issue, and we'll continue to partner with you in making sure that we deal with that issue. No different when it comes to access to markets, no different to when it comes to water, no different to the drought package as we see it today, what we'll need going forward. But I like to see things as always half full. What does the package look like if tomorrow it did rain? What is the package that we'll need to put on the table in supporting our farmers to get back up on their feet and get going? This is the sort of work we're already doing internally, identifying opportunity, but we want to do that in partnership with New South Wales farmers. And if you look at the investment, the wild dog fence out far west, significant investment of $37 million. Or, of course, the investment that we've now putting into Dopplers, or the investment in making sure we can connect our producers to markets through our road investment, our rail investment. There's more to come. We're not an arrogant government. We want to make sure we're engaged, and we want to make sure that we use this period of prosperity, this period where we do have funds and the ability to fund projects, that we do so in a way that unlocks the potential for today and the future. With that, I wish you all the best with your forum. I encourage you to be vocal, test and argue and debate the motions on the floor. I know you've got the Minister here for the days that you're here, and more importantly, the Minister is in tune with what you want to achieve, because the Minister will then bring that back to government to make sure that we're aligned with you. We are your strongest voice in this government. We continue to be a strong voice for regional New South Wales, because it's the place where we call home. For most of us, we are part of your community and we're part of your story. Thank you for having me here today on behalf of the Premier, who is away, but it's been an absolute pleasure for me to be here. Thank you very much.